Welcome to Oracle Apex Developer Professional Course. My name is Tawfiq. I am Senior Product Manager for Oracle Apex. In this module about managing and customizing interactive grids, you will learn how to customize an interactive grid as a developer, as well as how to customize an interactive grid as an end user. In this first lesson, we will learn how to customize an interactive grid as a developer. In this lesson, you will learn how to manage interactive grid using grid attributes. You will learn how to control pagination in an interactive grid. You will also learn how to customize an interactive grid toolbar and how to enable end users to save public reports. Let's get started. As a developer, you can determine whether the underlying data in the interactive grid is read-only or editable by end users. The example in the slide shows converting a read-only interactive grid into an editable interactive grid by modifying the interactive grid attributes. Interactive grid attributes control how an interactive grid works. You can use these attributes to determine if end users can edit the underlying data. You can use these attributes to configure report pagination. You can configure the toolbar and download options. You can control if and how users can save an interactive grid. You can add icon and detail views to the toolbar. The main difference between an interactive grid and an interactive report, which is another region type available in Apex, is that interactive grid allows the end users to edit the data on the grid during runtime. The application developer has the ability to customize how much end users can customize the report. Let us start by creating an interactive grid from scratch. I have a blank page on the screen as you see. To create an interactive grid, go to the body position and right click on the create region. In the property editor, I'm going to give a name to this region. I'll call it projects. And the type, I'm going to select interactive grid. And for the table name, I'm going to use the projects table. With that defined, I can click on save to save these changes and run this page to see the interactive grid in action. This is how this interactive grid looks like. Now, as you can see, this interactive grid is not editable. So to make this grid editable, what I'm going to do is go back to the page designer. For this interactive grid, in the attributes tab, there is a property group called edit. Under that property group, there is a property called enable. I can simply toggle this button to enable editing in this interactive grid. As soon as I enable this button, you can see various options appear. For example, allowed operations. You can define whether you want to allow add row functionality in this interactive grid, or you want to allow update functionality in this interactive grid, or delete functionality in this interactive grid. And if you expand the columns, you can see additional columns are added to this interactive grid, and the ID column is marked as the primary key. If you go to the processing tab, a new process of type interactive grid automatic row processing, which is the DML process for the grid, is also added by default. All these changes are done just by enabling editing for an interactive grid. After making the interactive grid editable, you can save these changes and go back to the application to see these changes in action. Now you can see this interactive grid has got a save button and an add row button, and I can simply double click on any cell to make the grid editable and update the columns, for example. Now let's say I don't want to allow add row functionality in this grid. I can declaratively do so by going to the attributes and simply toggling off the add row functionality under allowed operations. With that said, if I refresh this grid, now the end users can only update the existing records and cannot add new records to this interactive grid. So this is how you can make an interactive grid editable. One attribute of an interactive grid which you can modify is the source SQL query. As you know, interactive grid supports various types of sources. You can show data from third-party external REST endpoint via REST data sources in an interactive grid. You can also query the data from the local database by directly referencing a table or providing your own SQL query. The SQL query type gives you the flexibility to add as many columns as you want or write where conditions, for example. Or you can also use a pipeline function as an interactive grid source SQL query. The example in the slide shows modifying the SQL source of an interactive grid. If you have added new columns to the SQL query, the new columns are added to the end of the report. However, in an interactive grid, you can simply drag those columns to your desired location. In the source section, as you can see, I have selected a table to be the source for this interactive grid. I can also have a SQL query instead as the source for an interactive grid. When I change from table or view to SQL query, now a SQL query is automatically populated in the SQL query attribute, which is querying the EBA projects table which we have selected earlier. Here, now I get the flexibility to add my own where conditions or write complex SQL queries which will act as a source to this interactive grid. For example, I can add a where condition here. I'll simply click on save and go back and refresh the grid to see this where condition in action. This is how you can have an interactive grid which is based on a SQL query, which gives you greater flexibility to have SQL query of your choice. Now let's make this more interesting. Let's say I want the SQL query of an interactive grid to be dependent on user input. So let's say instead of hard coding the status ID, I want this to be something the end user can select, and based on the user selection, I want the grid to display the data. To do that, I need to first create a page item. I'm going to move to the top of the grid and I'm going to call it status. This will be a select list. Under list of values, I'm going to write a SQL query which queries the project status table. With that item created, I can now reference this item in the SQL query of the interactive grid. Instead of the hard-coded value, I can simply give the page item here and also assign this page item under page items to submit attribute. Now, as a last step, I'm going to create a dynamic action on the status page item, which will refresh the project's grid as soon as the status item is changed. To do that, I'm going to create a dynamic action, a meaningful name, and for the action, I'm going to select refresh, and the selection type will be region, and I'm going to select the interactive grid region. With that defined, I can simply save, and now I'll go and run the page. You see there is no record in the interactive grid right now. It's an empty interactive grid region. But when I select a status in the status page item, the grid is refreshed because of the dynamic action, and the latest value of this item is considered, and based on that, the grid shows the projects. You can also define and use column groups in interactive grids. You can choose to use column groups for just report headings or for just single review or for both. You can use column group headings you can reorder column group headings just like column headings. The example in the slide shows two column groups, project details and expenses. Now in this project's interactive grid, I want to have column group headers. I want the column's name, description, and project lead to have a column group header as project details, and I want to have these four columns created by, updated by, which are basically audit columns, to have column group header as audit details. So to do that, I can go to page designer, and under the interactive grid region, under columns, there is an attribute called column groups. And simply right click on this and click on create column group. The first column group I'm going to create is project details, and I'm going to create another column group called audit details. With these column groups created, now I can go to the columns and select name, description, and project lead. With these columns selected, on the right hand side I can scroll down to layout. Here I can see an attribute called group, and when I expand the select list I can see both the column groups which I have just created are listed here. So for these three columns I'm going to select project details as the column group, and for created, created by, updated, updated by, I want to have group audit details selected. With that said, when I save and refresh the page, now you can see the column group headers which we have created in action. We can also define and control pagination in interactive grid. When the interactive grid source, be it a table or a SQL query, returns many rows, an interactive grid is best displayed to the user with pagination. Pagination provides the end user with information about the number of rows displayed and the current position within the result set. Interactive grids include two types of pagination. One is page type, wherein the first rows will be displayed based on the number specified in rows per page. If there are additional rows, controls will be added to the report footer, allowing end users to navigate forwards and backwards between row sets. And the second option is scroll. Initially, enough rows to fill the height of the interactive grid are displayed. As the end user scrolls, additional rows are displayed, getting more data from the server as needed. In the slide you see, the interactive grid is using page type pagination. What you see here is the default pagination type, which is the scroll pagination type. To change the pagination type, go to Page Designer, select the interactive grid and go to Attributes. Under Attributes, you scroll down, you see a property group called pagination. Here you see two attributes, type and show total row count. For type, as you can see, scroll is the default pagination type that the interactive grids will have. You can choose to have a page as the pagination type, which will then give you interactive grid data in pages. So if there is more data here, you can simply use the buttons here to navigate through different pages of this interactive grid. Developers can also enable the capability for end users to save public reports in interactive grids. Developers can also restrict who can save a public report using the Save Public Report Authorization scheme. Public reports display on the Saved Reports list on the toolbar and are available to all users. However, only the user who creates a public report can save, rename, or delete it. Developers can select an authorization scheme to restrict who can save public report. If no authorization scheme is selected, then any user may save public reports for interactive grids. In interactive grids, by default, end users can create both private reports or alternative reports. To enable end users to create public reports, which will be accessible to everyone, we can go to Page Designer, select the interactive grid region. Under Attributes, scroll down to the property group Enable Users To. Here you have a property called Save Public Report. You can toggle that. That gives you one more attribute called Save Public Report Authorization. Here you can select an authorization based on which you want to allow or not allow specific users to save public report. So with this option enabled, you can save the setting, and now when I go back to the interactive grid and refresh the page, now as an end user I have access to save a report as public as well. This is how you can enable end users to create public reports in an interactive grid. To summarize, in this first lesson, you have learned how to manage an interactive grid using interactive grid region attributes. You have also learned how to control pagination in an interactive grid. Additionally, You have learned how to customize an interactive grid toolbar and enable end users to save public reports. Hope you have learned something new. Thank you for watching. Welcome to this module on managing and customizing interactive grids. In this lesson about customizing interactive grids as an end user, you will learn how to search for information in an interactive grid using the filter option. You will also learn how to resize, reorder, and sort columns in an interactive grid. Furthermore, you will learn how to use interactive grid components like column heading menu and actions menu available in interactive grid toolbar. Let's get started. A search bar displays at the top of interactive grids. Users can perform a non-case sensitive search on an interactive grid by entering queries in the search bar. You can either search on the entire interactive grid or only on a specific column. To search for a specific column, you can use the search icon that is available just beside the search bar. When you click on the search icon, you get various other options, and from there you can select the column you want to search. And once the column is selected, when you enter the search term in the search bar and click on go, this time the interactive grid returns only those rows where the column project has the term discussion in it. So this is how you can search for a specific column in interactive grid. In this interactive grid, you can search for a specific keyword using the search option available in the interactive grid toolbar. For example, if I search for the term develop and hit enter or click on go button, this will apply a filter on the interactive grid, and it will return all the rows where it can find the keyword develop in any of the columns. So basically this is a filter of type row. Additionally, you can also apply filter on specific column using the search available in IG toolbar by using the drop down menu available here. For example, instead of all text columns, I want to only search the name column. You can select name and you can see the placeholder here changed to search name. And when I type a search term and hit enter, this time it is only showing me the records where the search term develop exists in the column name. Once the filter is applied, you can enable or disable the filter by using the checkbox here. You can also remove the filter using the cross button here. You click on this button, the filter is removed and the interactive grid gets refreshed, showing all the records. End users can also rearrange columns by using the drag and drop functionality in the interactive grid. This slide shows an example of rearranging assigned to column and resizing the task name column. Another feasibility the end user gets with interactive grids is column sorting. Users can specify the sorting order of a column by clicking the sort descending buttons on the column heading. You can rearrange the columns in an interactive grid using the drag handle available in the column header. If you hover on the column header, you see the drag handle here. You can click on that, drag the column to your desired position and leave it there, and this is how you can rearrange columns in an interactive grid. You can also resize the column width by simply hovering on the column header on the edge, and this gives you the resizing cursor. You can simply click and drag to increase the width of a particular column. The end users can also sort data in an interactive grid using the sort buttons available in the column header. So if I hover on the budget column header, you can see the sort buttons available. I can sort them in ascending order from small to big, or descending order big to small, just by clicking on these buttons. I can remove the sorting by re-clicking the same button, which is now termed as don't sort button, and sorting is removed. In interactive grids, along with search bar and sort order buttons, the column headers also have column heading menu. In this column heading menu, end users get a buttons toolbar, text filter using which the end user can search this column for a specific search term, and unique list of values for that column. Under buttons toolbar, the end user gets various options like control break, using which user can create a control break on the selected column, there is aggregate option using which opens the aggregation dialog box to define an aggregation against the selected column. There is freeze option using which the selected column freezes in place, putting the selected column outside the horizontal scrolling section. And then there is also hide option using which the selected column can be hidden from the view. The column heading menu is also loaded with a lot of features like control break, aggregate, freeze, and hide. For example, I can apply control break on the project lead column. Now the data is grouped by the project lead column. I can enable and disable this control break by simply toggling the checkbox here, and I can remove the control break by clicking on the remove control break cross button. Similarly, I can perform an aggregate, sum, or maybe an average, everything on the budget column, and click on save. And you can see the average is shown here. Let's say I increase the column width, which gives me the horizontal scroll, and it makes it difficult for me to understand which project this corresponding record belongs to. In that case, what I can do is simply freeze this particular column, and let me expand this a bit. And now when I scroll, the frozen columns are placed outside the horizontal scroll, and the rest of the columns can be scrolled. So this is how you can use freeze from the column heading menu. You can use the hide option to hide a particular column, and to unhide a column, you can go to the actions menu, columns, and simply recheck the hidden column and save. That will bring back the hidden column. The interactive grid toolbar also has an actions menu which contains functions and submenus for customizing the data in interactive grids. Under actions menu, user also gets an option to display the data in the interactive grid in the form of a chart. Various chart types such as area, bar, line, pie, polar, etc. are available. Once a chart is created, user can switch between grid view and chart view by clicking on the toggle that appears in the interactive grid toolbar. Now, speaking of the actions menu is available in the interactive grid toolbar, which is loaded with a lot of functionality. We will learn more about the actions menu in the next lesson, but just as an example, you can create a chart on the existing interactive grid, clicking on the chart option available under actions menu. Let me select bar type, and orientation, I'm going to keep it vertical. Label should be the name of the project. Value should be the budget, and aggregation can be sum. With this defined, click on save, and this will create a chart wherein the sum of the budget is being shown. Now with this chart view defined, you can switch between the report view and the chart view by simply using the view toggle available in the interactive grid toolbar. To summarize, in this lesson, you have learned how to search for information in an interactive grid using the filter option. You have also learned how to resize, reorder, and sort columns in an interactive grid. You have also learned how to use column heading menu and actions menu available in interactive grid toolbar. Hope you have learned something new. Thank you for watching. Welcome to this module on managing and customizing interactive grids. In this lesson about customizing interactive grid as an end user, we will learn how to use Actions menu and explore various options available under Actions menu in the interactive grid toolbar. We will also learn how the end users can customize and save the interactive grids as a report. Furthermore, we will learn how to use the refresh and flashback options available in Actions menu of interactive grid. Let's get started. You can change the column display in an interactive grid using the Actions menu. To do that, click on the Actions menu and then select Columns. The Columns dialog box appears. By selecting and deselecting the displayed checkbox, you can configure whether a column should be visible or hidden in the interactive grid view. You can also specify minimum column width in pixels for each of these columns by selecting the specific column in the list. Additionally, you can also adjust the order in which the columns appear in the grid by selecting the move up or move down buttons at the bottom of this page. Additionally, you can also toggle the columns button, and using this button you can only view displayed or not displayed columns. After saving the configuration, you can just click on save and the configuration that you have saved will appear in the grid. The Actions menu available in an interactive toolbar provides end users with a lot of customization opportunities. The first such option available under Actions menu is the Columns option, using which end users can define which columns should be visible in the interactive grid and which columns should not be visible in the interactive grid. For example, I can simply toggle created by updated by columns to be not visible in the interactive grid by checking off the displayed checkbox against these columns. And I can also define the width of a column by simply selecting the column and providing the minimum column width in pixels. I can also sort the columns using these sort buttons available here. For example, I want to move the project lead column after the name column, so I can just select the project lead column and move it up by using the up arrow and down arrow keys available here. Once this configuration is defined, I can click on save. Now, as you can see, the name column has expanded a bit to 500 pixels, and the columns which we have hidden, the created by, updated by columns, are all hidden from the view. And I can use the reset button here to go back to the default view which you get in an interactive grid to reset all the changes. Another option available under Actions menu is creating a column filter. You can create a column filter by clicking on the Actions menu and selecting Filter option. This opens up the Filters dialog. Here you can specify the type of filter you want to create. You can either create a column-based filter or a row-based filter. You can also specify the column on which you want to apply the filter and the operator. Once these filter settings are configured, you can click on Save, which will then apply the filter on the interactive grid, and the interactive grid will show all the projects with budget less than or equal to 1000. The second option available under Actions menu is the Filter option, using which you can apply filters on an interactive grid. You can select the type of filter you want to apply. It can either be a column-based filter or a row-based filter. When you select column-based filter, you can select the column and the operator you want to use to filter the data set. For example, I can simply select budget less than or equals value 1000. So with this, I want to filter all the rows where the budget column is less than or equal to 1000. With this defined, when I click on save, the interactive grid refreshes and it shows the filtered data accordingly. Let's make it 8000 for example, and if I apply the filter again, this is how end users can filter the data using various filter options available under Actions menu. You can also add highlighting to an interactive grid using the Actions menu. To add highlighting to an interactive grid, click on Actions menu and select Format, which opens another submenu where you can select Highlight. This opens up the Highlight dialog box. Here, you can give a name to the highlight you're going to add to your interactive grid. You can specify whether this is going to be a row level highlight or a column level highlight. And then you can specify the CSS styling, background color, text color, and a preview of that can also be seen. And then you can specify the condition based on which the highlight will be applied to the interactive grid. You can select the condition type. You can either have a row-based condition or a column-based condition for highlighting. Once this highlighting is configured, you can click on Save, which then applies this highlighting to the interactive grid. End users can also add highlighting by going to Format submenu available under Actions menu and clicking on Highlight, which opens the highlighted dialog box. There I can specify a name, and this I want to be a row highlight and not column highlight. I can select a background color for the row. And a text color if I want. I'll leave it as default. And the column condition can be set as budget less than or equals value, let's say 8,000. I'm going to name it differently, 8,000, and click on Save. With this, all the rows where the column condition is valid, they're all highlighted with the CSS styling you have defined in this highlight window. You can also add a control break in an interactive grid using an Actions menu. To do that, click on Actions menu and select Format. Under Format, click on Control Break. This opens up the Control Break dialog box. Here, you can specify the column on which you want to apply the control break. You can specify the sorting direction. You can also specify how you want to treat the null values. Once the control break is configured, you can click on Save, which then refreshes the interactive grid and applies the control break. And users can also create control break from the same format menu. For example, I want to create a control break on the project lead column, and here I can define how should the control break be sorted, ascending or descending order, and I can also define how the nulls should be treated. I'm going to go with the defaults and click on Save, and this will apply the control break on the interactive grid. Once you have customized your interactive grid with highlighting, control break, etc., you can save this customized interactive grid as a report. To do that, click on Actions menu, go to Report and click on Save As. This opens the Report Save As dialog. Here, you can specify to save this report either privately, which will then only be visible to you, or publicly, which will then be visible to everyone. You can give a meaningful name to the report and click on Save. This creates a report which can be selected from the select list that appears in the interactive grid toolbar once one or more reports are saved for an interactive grid. End users can also save the customized report as public or private report. For example, let me apply control break. And also highlighting. For budget column, greater than or equals 40,000. Now with this grid customized, end users can go to Actions, go to Report, and click on Save As to save this grid as a public, private, or alternate report, and give it a name, something like this, and click on Save. And now this report will be available under private reports for this end user. You can also download or email an interactive grid as a report. To do that, click on Actions and go to Download, which then opens up the Download dialog box. Here, you can select the format in which you want the report to be downloaded or emailed. Various options available are CSV, HTML, PDF, and Excel. You can check the Send as Email checkbox to send this report as an email instead of downloading. You can specify the recipient, that is the to address, and copy the CC addresses in the respective fields and click on Send as Email. The entire interactive grid will then be sent as an email to the respective email IDs. Additionally, from the Actions menu, end users can also download or email the report. The available formats are CSV, HTML, PDF, and Excel. When I click on download, the entire report will be downloaded to my local device. Additionally, you can also get this report as an email attachment instead of downloading it to your local device. To do that, you can select the format and check the Send as Email checkbox and specify the email address, the to email address, CC, BCC, and the subject. And then click on Send as Email to send this report as an attachment to your email. You can update an interactive grid with the most current data available in the database by selecting Refresh under Actions menu, Data submenu. Refreshing an interactive grid is quicker than reloading the entire page in the browser. Refreshing is also a valuable feature for highly fluid datasets. End users can revert an interactive grid to a specific point in time by using the flashback option available under Actions menu. To revert an interactive grid to a previous state, click on the Actions menu and select Data, which then opens up the submenus. Click on Flashback, which then opens up the Flashback dialog, wherein you can specify the number of minutes into the past that you wish to return to. For example, in the slide, you enter 10 and click on Save, which then reloads the grid, giving you the report data as of 10 minutes ago. Furthermore, some of the other options available under Actions are refreshing the grid. Using this option, you can refresh the grid and get fresh data from the database. Now let's say I have modified this record and saved. Now I can use the flashback option available under Actions, Data submenu to revert the interactive grid to a specific point in the past. For example, if I enter 10 minutes ago, click on Save, this will show me the grid data as of 10 minutes ago. To summarize, in this lesson, you have learned how to use the Actions menu and various options available under Actions menu in the interactive grid toolbar. You have also learned how end users can customize and save an interactive grid as a report. Furthermore, you have learned how to use the refresh and flashback options available under Actions menu in the interactive grid. Hope you have learned something new. Thank you for watching.
Welcome to the module on creating application page controls. In this lesson, we will learn how to create application items and page items. My name is Apurva and I'm a Senior Product Manager for Oracle Apex. Let's get started. Developers can create and manage various application page controls, including buttons, page level items, dynamic actions, and trees. In this video, we will learn how to create and use page level items.
On the screen, you see the project details form page in the Page Designer.
you see different items listed under the items node. An item is part of a HTML form. An item can be a text field, text area, password, select list, checkbox, and so on. Item attributes affect the display of items on a page. For example, these attributes can impact where a label displays, how large an item is, and if the item displays next to or below the previous item. There are two types of items. Page items. Page items are placed on a page and have associated user interface properties such as display only, label, and label template. Examples of page level items include a checkbox, date picker, display as text, file browse field, pop-up list of values, select list, or a text area. Application items. These are not associated with a page and therefore have no user interface properties. You can use an application item as a global variable. The screen shows a few examples of page items. Text field, text area, and date picker, select list, number field. Let's learn a little more about application items. Application level items do not display, but you can use an application item as a global variable to the application. Application items can be set using computations, processes, or bypassing values on a URL. You use application items to maintain a session state that is not displayed and is not specific to any page. To access the application items page, you need to navigate to the application home page and click Shared Components. Under Application Logic, you select Application Items. The Application Items page is displayed. On the screen, you see an example of application items from a completed application. Now let's move on to page items. You can create a page item in either of the following ways. From a rendering tab, you navigate to the page designer, and on the rendering tab, you right-click the region node where you want to create the item and select Create Page Item. Or you can navigate to the page designer, and in the central pane, you click Layout and then the Items tab in the gallery. Passing the cursor over an item displays a tooltip that describes it. Select the item you want to create and drag it to the appropriate location in the layout where you want to create it. After either of the above steps, the property editor displays page item attributes. Attributes are organized in groups. The Messages tab displays a red or yellow badge to identify messages you need to address. Selecting a message displays the associated attribute in the property editor. You must address the red error message before you can save it. Edit the appropriate attributes in the property editor. Note that to create an item from gallery, you can also right-click the item, click Add to, and select the appropriate location. You can use Apex to create the following page items. In the gallery layout, hover over each of the item type to read more about what each item does. To include any of these items into your layout, just drag and drop the item onto the layout, or right-click on an item and select Add to and select the location you would like to add. Let us quickly review the steps involved in creating a page item. First, you open the page definition in the page designer. Right-click the region body and select Create Page Item. Enter the attributes such as name, type, and source in the property editor. And finally, click Save. You can also click Save and Run Page to see how the page item appears on the page. Now, let us look at a demo of creating a page item. In this demo, you will see how to create a shuttle item type on a form page and also set the item value. In my Apex workspace, I have already created a report and a form on the projects table. For example, page 4 is the project's report and page 5 is the project's form. The form is created as a dialog page. Now let us view the form in the page designer. In the page rendering, right-click the form region, in this case project, and select Create Page Item. Next, enter the attributes in the property editor. Under identification for name, I enter p5_assigned. p5_assigned. For type, select shuttle. Notice the error message in the messages section beside the page selector that says list of value type is required. Let us address this error. I rename the label to assign to. Under list of values, select SQL query for type. For SQL statement, I enter the SQL query where it is fetching the assigned to column from the projects table. Here, the first assigned to in the select statement is the display value and the second assigned to is the return value. Under source, for type, select SQL query, return :separated value. For SQL query, I enter the following SQL query. This SQL query is fetching all the distinct assigned to values from the projects table. Now click Save. Remember, you cannot click Save and run the page since this is a modal dialog. I'll go back to the application and run the application. In the projects report page, if click on Edit, opens the project form we edited earlier. Here you see the shuttle item type appears on the form page. Note that you can reference item values stored in the session state in regions, computations, processes, validation, and branches. For more information, refer to Oracle Apex App Builder User's Guide. To summarize, you first created a report with a form on the projects table that shows which projects are created and displays the project status. Later, you created a shuttle item which displays the assigned to list, which contains employee details alphabetically to make assigning people to a project easier. Item attributes affect the display of items on a page. For example, these attributes can impact where a label displays, how large an item is, and if the item displays next to or below the previous item. Now let us see how to edit item attributes in the property editor. Click on Edit Page File. On either the Rendering tab or the Layout tab, select the item to edit. The property editor changes to display the item's attributes. Attributes are organized in groups. To find a group or attribute, search for the group or attribute. The property editor displays the group of attributes. To return to the default display, delete the keywords, or you can use Go to Group. Click the Go to Group and select the group. To return to the default display, click the Go to Group again and select Expand All. Edit the appropriate attributes. Edited attributes display a green marker to the left of the attribute name until the page is saved. To learn more about an attribute, see the field level help by navigating to the Help tab. And finally, click Save. You can add an icon to an item. Let us see how to do that by editing a page item. In the Page Designer, select the item to edit in the Rendering tab or the Layout tab. You can see that the property editor changes to display the item attributes. Navigate to Appearance. Under Appearance icon, select your desired icon using the icon picker.
If your theme uses font Apex, review the Universal Theme Sample application to view the available icons and modifiers. Click Save. Navigate back to the application to view the icon displayed next to the page item. Note that this icon will be displayed inside of the item, not as part of the label. You can reference item values stored in a session state in regions, computations, validations, processes, and branches. The syntax for referring item values are shown in the table below. :my_item. This syntax can be used for references within a SQL query and within a PLSQL code. :my_item. This is the PLSQL syntax referencing the item value using the function. Use this syntax in PLSQL code of packages or stored procedures and functions. Avoid this syntax in SQL statements. It may result in performance problems. :my_item. This is the standard PLSQL syntax referencing the numeric item value using the function. Use this syntax in PLSQL code of packages or stored procedures and functions. Avoid this syntax in SQL statements. It may result in performance problems. :my_item. This is used in static text for exact substitution. Exact substitution syntax should be avoided in SQL or PLSQL code because it can result in SQL injection vulnerabilities. Before we wind up, let us look at creating a quick pick selection on a page item. Quick picks enable users to select predefined values with just one click, rather than typing in text or selecting from a list of available options. If the item type supports quick pick selection, use the quick picks attributes to define up to 10 selections that display under a given item. Clicking a quick pick sets the value of the item. On the screen, you see an example of creating quick picks to select a status on the project details form. Let us see how to create this in our Apex application. Navigate to the project form we created earlier and view the attributes of the p5_status page item. Select the group Quick Picks in the property editor. Select Yes to specify to display quick picks for this page item. Link attributes. Enter the HTML attributes that are associated with the display of each quick pick link. For label, enter the label for each quick pick. This label is the text the end user of the application sees. For this example, I enter open as the label name. For value, enter the value associated with each quick pick. This value replaces the existing item value when the user clicks the quick pick. In this example, I type open for the value. Similarly, and you can enter up to 10 quick picks for each page item. Finally, click Save. Navigate back to your application. Run the application to see the changes. Here you see the list of quick picks that we defined for the status page item. Clicking on any of the quick picks will replace the existing value for the status item.
To summarize, in this lesson, you learned how to create and use page level items. You also learned how to create a shuttle page item and quick picks. I hope you learned something useful. Thank you for watching. Welcome to the module on creating application page controls. In this video, we will learn how to create list of values in Apex. Let's get started. As you are already aware, developers can create and manage various application page controls including page level items. In this lesson, we will learn how to create list of values in Apex.
LOVs or list of values are used everywhere, be it forms or reports. There are three types of LOVs you can create in Apex. Static LOV. The static list of values is based on the text value you enter. Dynamic LOV. The dynamic list of values is based on the SQL query or the SQL query returned by a function body. Cascading LOV. One item on the page determines the list of values for another item. Let us review the quick steps involved in creating a static LOV. First, you navigate to your application homepage and click on Shared Components. Under Other Components, select List of Values. The List of Values page appears. Click Create. Specify the source, name and type. Now, you enter the static display and return values. Finally, click Create List of Values. A notification is displayed upon successful creation and the LOV is displayed in the list. Now let us look at a demo of creating a static LOV. Oracle Apex stores the display values, return values, and the sort sequence you specify in the list of values repository. After you add a static LOV to the repository, you can create an item and display it as a checkbox, radio group, select list, or pop-up list based on this definition. You can see that I have navigated to a sample application I have created earlier. Now click on Shared Components and under Other Components, click on List of Values. The List of Value page appears. Click Create to create a new static LOV. Select From Scratch and click on Next. Provide a name for the static list. For type, choose Static and click on Next. Enter the list of display value and return value for the static list. Once you enter the list of display and return values, click on Create List of Values. Now, Oracle Apex stores the display and return values and the sort sequence you specify in the list of values repository. After you add a static LOV to the repository, you can create an item and display it as a checkbox, radio group, select list, or a pop-up list based on this definition. Now let us move on to review the quick steps involved in creating a dynamic LOV. First, you navigate to the application homepage and navigate to Shared Components. Under Other Components, select List of Values. The List of Value page appears. Click Create. Specify the source, name and type. The difference between dynamic and static LOV is that for type you select dynamic while creating a dynamic LOV. Specify the data source and the source type. For column mappings, specify the return column and the display column. Click Create List of Values. A notification is displayed upon successful creation and the LOV is displayed in the list. Let us switch back to the Apex workspace to see a demo on creating a dynamic LOV. I have already navigated to the Shared Components and List of Values page in the application. Click on Create. With the default value being from scratch, click on Next. Enter a name for the dynamic LOV. For type, select Dynamic and click Next. The default data source is the local database. You can also select REST-enabled SQL service or REST data source. For the source type, in this demo, we select SQL query. Enter a SQL query that returns two columns. The first column is the display value. The display value is the value you see in a list of values. This column should be aliased and must have a different name than the return column. The second column is the return value. The return value is the value returned when the display value is selected. The return column should be aliased if it includes any operations. Use bind variables syntax within your SQL query to reference the session state of the application or page items. Click Next. For column mappings, specify the return column and the display column. Click Create. After creating a named LOV as a shared component, you can associate with a page item type that can accept the list of values. For example, select list, shuttle, checkbox, radio group, pop-up LOV, and list manager. Now let us see how we can associate this dynamic LOV to a page item. View the page in the page designer. I navigate back to the project form that we had created earlier. Under rendering, expand the items and select the item with which you want to associate the LOV. The page item display type should be an LOV type in the property editor. For example, for status and identification type, I select list. In the property editor, under list of values, select shared component. Then select the named LOV from the list of values, select list. Dynamic status is the dynamic LOV we created earlier in the shared components. Now click Save. Navigate to the application to see that the status has been converted to a list of values and these values are being fetched from the dynamic LOV we created earlier. Let us look deeper at cascading LOVs. On the screen, two select lists appear. Making a selection in the department select list determines which individuals display in the employees select list. By creating a cascading LOV, one item on the page determines the list of values for another item. App Builder includes cascading LOV support for the following item types: select list, shuttle, checkbox, radio group, pop-up LOV, and list manager. You create a cascading LOV by creating two items. To populate the second item, you specify a cascading LOV parent item when running the create item wizard or by editing the item's attributes. Here you can see the quick steps involved in creating a cascading LOV. First, you view the page in the page designer. Create the first item as a select list. The list of values includes a SQL query. Now, create the second item as a select list. Under list of values, for SQL query, include the reference of the first item in the where clause. Under cascading LOV parent items, select the first page item. Click Save. Let us switch back to the Apex instance to see how it is done. You can see a page in the page designer where I have created a form for the employee details. Now to begin creating the cascading LOV, we create a first item as a select list. Here I already have a list of page items in the form. I choose P7_department number as the first item and convert it into a select list. In the property editor, under identification type, change the item to a select list. The list of values includes a SQL query. Enter the SQL query to fetch the department names. Now, let us edit the second item. Select P7_ename and in the property editor, change the type to a select list. Under list of values, for type, select SQL query. When entering the SQL query, Include the reference of the first item in the where clause. For example, in this query, I have included P7 underscore department number in the where clause of the SQL query. Also, under cascading list of values for parent items, select P7 underscore department number. This indicates that the list of values for P7 underscore ename is determined by the value selected in the P7 underscore department number select list. Click Save and save and run the page. As you can see, department number is a select list. Select any of the department names and the e-name list is refreshed to display the list of employees who belong to a particular department. Try changing the department name to sales and you see the list of employees accordingly.
To summarize, in this lesson, you learned how to create different types of list of values in Apex: static, dynamic, and cascading LOV. I hope you learned something useful. Thank you for watching.